Welcome to Double Helix, where we unravel the science of connections. In today's episode, we are joined by the empathy guy, Joseph Cope. To give you a quick spotlight from our conversation, Joseph shares 3 lessons. First, empathy is a skill that you can build intentionally. It's not just an inborn trait. Second, real leadership starts with vulnerability and self-awareness. Check in with yourself before connecting with others. And third, try Joseph's Cargo, C-A-R-G-O. The model is connect, stay accountable, notice your own resistance, focus on the other's gain, and keep a growth outlook. The one thing that you can do today in this whole process as we talk about empathy, when someone shares a feeling, pause and reflect it back, like it sounds like you're frustrated. That simple step shows you're truly listening and builds real empathy. Please make certain to like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast. So are you ready? Let's jump into the full episode. Welcome everybody back to Double Helix, where we actually strive to unravel the science in connections. So I'm stumbling on myself a little bit this morning. Joseph and I had a really great time to make sure everything was working properly. So Joseph, we're actually excited to have Joseph Cope on with us today. He is known as the empathy guy. And Joseph and I connected, I think probably for the first time 6-8 weeks ago, somewhere around that time period. Yeah. And we had a great conversation on the phone. It was really intriguing and exciting. But what I want to do is turn a couple of minutes over to Joseph so that I'd love you to introduce yourself. And we've talked, you know what the podcast focus is. And so I'd love to hear just a little bit about you, and then we will get going.
Thanks for having me on, Mark, and thanks for working through the technical difficulties. We'll both be stumbling over our words here a little bit, but I'm glad that I'm on, and I'm glad we're making it work. My name is Joseph. I'm the empathy guy, and one of the things that we're going to put out to your audience is this podcast about connection really resonated with me because of the work that I get to do with humans in the space of creating space for connection. And when you've worked as an award-winning middle school teacher for almost 2 decades, and now you get to work with adults who act like middle schoolers, you know that there's something to be said about creating space for connection. And my expertise is in the space of creating that space and doing everything we can to create that space. And it comes from working with really, really challenging people, also known as teenagers. That's who we work with. And right. Now my days are filled with working with adults, but all of that experience of coming from the classroom and then working in educational leadership has given me an opportunity to bring something into the world of adults that we don't often see through a lens that we don't often think of. And that space of creation is what we're all about.
Oh, awesome. I'm so excited. You mentioned, we're all middle schoolers. It reminds me, and you might know the book. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, but I read a book recently where the author was talking about, we're all adults, but we're 7-year-olds in our head, right? If we don't get what we want, I'm not going to talk to them, or, it's that extreme stuff. And so I think we all experience that. We still have that middle schooler, young person that's running the show often in the back of our heads.
Think about, you're a parent, Mark, and I'm a parent. And when our children were younger, don't you just remember thinking, gosh, I wish you could just reason with me like an adult? But their capacity as a child to reason with you as an adult, it's minimal because they don't have the experience.
Right.
And as an adult, yes, we don't have the experience in some cases, but as an adult, now it becomes a matter of bringing it in as a skill. Like those connections between humans sometimes come down to the fact that some people are just skilled at connecting and others are not as skilled at connecting. But when you frame it as a skill, it's something that we can grow and something that we can move towards and something we can do with intention.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't help but I thought an old instance came to mind when we talk about, when you mentioned trying to reason with a child, right?
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with my father years ago. This was probably 25 years ago, a long time ago. and there was some family drama, right, kind of thing. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, and my dad put something into perspective that I had never thought of to that point in my life. He said, Mark, you need to understand that as you were growing up, every year we had to get to know the new Mark, because you were progressing and you were going from adolescent to teenager to every year there was a new dynamic. And he said, and he was like, as your parents, we've pretty much stayed pretty stable. So now it's a matter of you having to get to know who we've actually always been.
Mm.
Right. So we've gone through this whole process. And he said, as a parent, Mark, you've been a different person all growing up. Every year you were someone new. And it's like starting all over. And I went, well, that is so true. Because at that point I had kids, and I went, huh, yeah, that explains why last year I wanted to, throttle this one. And
Yeah.
this year he's like, he's so cool.
Yeah. That's so wise of your dad to even be able to verbalize that to you as a young man and
Oh
give you
yeah.
that
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, it was an eye-opening thing, and I left that conversation going, that is so true, because I could see it with my own kids. My kids were younger, but I could see that. It's like, yeah, every year it's like dealing with somebody new. I hate
Mm.
to say dealing, but it's that process, right?
So here's why this is resonating. And I'm so glad that you told me that story early, because part of my purpose in digging into this empathy space is to redefine empathy as a skill. And just like anything in the world, some people are born more skilled than others. It sucks, right? But
Right.
there are some people who, because of how they were raised, their empathic nature is off the charts low. That tends to be men, right? And we're just going to stereotype. We're just going to, okay. And then there are some people who are off the charts, super feely, touchy feely, and super into the emotions. And you can recognize that neither one of those is healthy, right? So when you can integrate empathy as a skill with intention, now that's powerful. And see, the way that I have redefined empathy is the space that a leader can create for another human so that individual can see the value of change for themselves. And what your dad did in such a skillful way was he engaged in that space. He created the space for you, Mark, to see the value of change for Mark's benefit. And think about the
Yeah, exactly.
perspective that shifted within you as a parent, as a human. And now here we are talking about it 25 years later. That's the impact that moment of skillful empathy had on you 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
It's something. It's really something. And the thing is, the thing is, people might ask your dad, like, how'd you do that with Mark? And he would probably say, I don't know. Like, he's my son. I just had the conversation with him. But how can leaders, how can people who feel that disconnect of, gosh, we got to have this hard conversation? How do they go into that hard conversation with intention to create that space? And that's
That's the
empathy
challenge.
with intention. That's what
Yeah.
I like to call fierce empathy, is going into it knowing that, gosh, this is going to be uncomfortable, or this could really be uncomfortable, or I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be, but we are going to lean in with intention to have this conversation.
Right. Yeah. And that's a challenge from a leadership standpoint. That's a real challenge. It's easy for us as leaders to go in and go, you know what? Here's the line. We're done. Right.
Yep.
You either do this or thanks for stopping by. Or I used to joke around, we'll make you available for future opportunities in the workforce.
Code for get your stuff done, get out of my office, and we're done with this because I said so. Well, okay, hold on. Now, Mark, think about this. Like, okay, let's put this back in the child perspective. Put this back in the middle school perspective. A middle schooler actually has the guts to say, "Why are you making me do this?" And you know what? Adults who are acting like middle schoolers will say? They will say, "Because I said so."
Because I said so.
And how What space did that create for that middle school child to see the value of change for themselves? Zero. What it did was it put up a wall of defensiveness. And now that middle school kid is thinking, well, that person hates me, or that person doesn't see me for who I am, or I'm not good enough for that. Or think about all of the stories that get created because somebody didn't have the skill in that moment to say, dude, you don't feel heard. Let me try one more time with you. Can I give you a chance? Or I'm not quite feeling the way that I want to be the best version of me. Let me own me right now. Let's come back to this conversation. I want to hear what you have to say.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because, you can go from, and this is, I think, you mentioned it's a skill, right? And, and many, many times in my business leadership life, I have to stop and go, all right, this person does not feel like they're being heard. And even though we've been on the phone for 45 minutes and they've said the same thing 12 times, sometimes verbatim, sometimes in a different way. And to me, that says they're not, I am in some way not letting them know that I can hear them, that I'm not just listening for 45 minutes on a phone call. Cause I've had those phone calls, right? Where you sit for forever on the phone with somebody, and I'm on my end, and I'm just going to be totally frank. I'm on my end going, huh, uh-huh. And I'm thinking, like, this is time 12. You've told me this. And I don't, I'm not verbalizing it, but you're sitting and listening. And I found for me that the biggest struggle at that point is to say, all right, Bob, we'll just use Bob's name, but I always use Bob in context. And I think so. Poor, if your name's Bob, I apologize, but, but it's just like, okay, Bob, this is what you're telling me. This is what I'm hearing. Is that accurate? And sometimes that will help. And sometimes it doesn't, because they still have this emotional energy behind it that they have to keep churning and churning and churning. And the hard part as a leader in my mind is to know when to say, I've heard you. We're done. We're not going to talk about this because we're not getting anywhere by 45 minutes of the same thing. So how do we create a space? How do we create that space, right? To where we can then have that conversation with somebody in a way that they go, number one, I'm heard. Number two, we understands. And number three, I feel comfortable enough to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. One, remember this. I don't know what the percentage is. I've heard up to 90% of our communication is not in our words.
Right.
And so when you're on the phone and you're listening, it's really hard to know what your body language is. So that's why it's really easy for someone on the phone to just go, 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 go. So one is when we're in person, just making sure that our body language suggests I'm here for you, not against you. I'm here to connect and I'm here to listen with intention because I want to really hear what's going on underneath the words. That's one big piece, is how we communicate. Now, if you're on the phone, it's important to be able to have those conversations and regularly listen. And then when you hear a pause, affirm what you know to be the emotion. Boy, it sounds like you really feel frustrated. Let me make sure that I hear what you're saying. So rather than having 45 minutes of dumping, you have 10 minutes of dumping, and then you affirm the emotion, not the words. You affirm the emotion and the feeling, and then another 10 minutes and you affirm. And then when you get to that end, when you as the leader realize this isn't going anywhere, they still need to dump. It's actually very connecting to leave it open-ended, but on their terms. It sounds like we've spent 45 minutes in this conversation, and I really want to hear what you have to say underneath, because there's a lot that sounds like there still needs to come out. I wonder if I can propose this. Can we sleep on it tonight? And if you're open to it, can I call you back tomorrow at 3 p.m.? Because I want to make sure that you know that you're a priority and what you have to say matters. There's no point in making a decision when we're both emotional, but I really want to hear what you have to say. Because you, as the leader, your responsibility is to stay as grounded as you can. And once you feel that we're done, I'm done with you, you've lost your grounding. So for you to just take the pause, hit the power of pause, and keep the room open for that space to still be created. Because the last thing you want is at the end of that conversation to feel like, oh gosh, we got a barrier we got to go overcome. The last thing you heard was me saying, we're done with this. You take the time that you need. You clearly need to have some time to cool off. Like, no one wants to hear that, right?
And no one
To
no one
come
will
back to
accept
it.
that.
And no one will accept it. And now you've
Right.
got more resistance to get to fight through just to get to that space of creating space. So I think that there's so much to dig into in that, just in that little bit. But I think one of the big things that leaders can remember is if you're having an in-person conversation, your willingness to be open, to maintain eye contact when it feels safe, to position yourself to, I loved in one of your previous episodes how we talked about the belly to belly conversation, right?
Right. Yeah.
Positioning yourself in a way that just says, I'm here for you, not against you. I want to hear what you have to say. Put it out on the table because I'm regulated enough that I can hear what you hear what you're saying underneath the words.
Right. Yeah. I remember years ago, well, now this is even further back, right? Um, where I was serving a church mission, and the leader in that area for the church mission, everybody meets with him periodically, see how things are going, what can he do, and I was the frustrated person.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the very first time I met with this individual in his office, you're thinking a bit. This is the mid '80s, so a big corporate kind of office, the mahogany on the walls, the big desk, the whole thing, right? And in his, he had his desk right in the middle of the room, but in front of his desk was a chair and a chair, and they were facing each other. And the most uncomfortable I have ever been in a meeting was where he had me sit down in that chair facing sideways to the desk, and he went over to the other one and sat and scooted his chair up to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a 21 year old, 20-year-old kid, and I'm doing this. Like, how far can I push my head back? And I remember feeling so extremely uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
because he was in my physical bubble, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you, because of the way he did it, by
Mm-hmm.
the end of the conversation, I found myself leaning into this man because
Mm-hmm.
he had developed, and he had developed the skills to create that safe space where I could then have a conversation with him and tell him what I was feeling. And then by the end, you're like, I'm going to do it. Right. That was the most uncomfortable I've ever been in a meeting because it was outside of what we normally do. And I think
Mm-hmm.
now I don't believe you have to be chair, knee to knee in a chair, like in that situation. That's way
Right.
extreme.
Right.
Um, but that level of connectedness
Mm-hmm.
where, he was 100% present in that moment. There wasn't
Mm-hmm.
phones distracting. There wasn't computer. He had turned his chair. So there was nothing to pull him away from our conversation. And so that's,
Mm-hmm.
I think, why it became such a comfortable place, is because he was truly trying to connect.
Mm. And your story it resonates so deeply because it was obviously somebody who had done it before. You weren't the first
Right.
conversation like that, right?
Exactly.
You also were somebody who realized that eventually his leadership is worth trusting.
Right.
It might not have felt that way at the beginning, right? But eventually, through his words and his actions and his micro actions,
Right.
he was able to give you that sense of trust, like this is worth coming into. And part of what I train and coach and speak about from the stages is being able as a leader to recognize where somebody is in their capacity to trust you, and what are the actions that you are taking to not only affirm that, but speak in a currency that has value to them, right?
Right.
Like if you had come into that situation, Mark, and you were just off your rocker and just loud, emotional, like, how are you doing this to me? and he sat down and did that to you, you may have bolted because
Right.
you were not
Yeah.
in a place to be in that place to place. But think about this, if you or anyone else in a situation where they feel unjustly treated, they don't feel, and somebody calls you into the principal's office, for lack of a better term,
Right.
right? If you sit across from them, you're saying to them with your body language, I'm above you. You need to listen to me. But what if that person took a step back and rather than sitting face to face, you sat side to side where both people were facing forward? And now the conversation is like a long car drive conversation. And it's, yeah, there's a lot going on right now. I'm not even going to ask you I'm not going to ask for eye contact right now. I want to hear what's going on. So take a breath. I'm just going to listen. But what's going down? And you've alleviated the pressure of the power balance by sitting
Right.
side by side. You've alleviated the pressure of connection, like by eliminating the face to face. And now you're just on a car ride in the middle of Montana with nothing but big sky in front of you. And all I'm doing is listening to you. But it
That
just
that
gives
that gives that
opportunity.
that gives that, you mentioned that opportunity, that gives that ability to as well, so that you are both facing the same direction.
That's the metaphor in what you just spoke is so deep. Like remember what I said, I'm here for you, not against you. We're moving in a direction, and I just am here to create space for you to see the value of change. And when I say change, just the value of fractional perspective shift. That's all.
Right.
That's it. Let's just get you to see fractional perspective shift just a little bit.
Yeah. My brain's just spinning over here. Right. I got to make sure that everything stays oiled. Otherwise, it's going to get squeaky up there in not too distant future.
Well, one
So,
thing, Mark,
yeah.
let me just say one more thing is one of the things that I've found out uh, through working with middle school kids forever is the first thing that comes out of a middle schooler's mouth when they are frustrated, when they feel misheard, when they are highly emotional, and we'll call it dysregulated. As an adult, it is actually okay to discount that as the fumes that came out before the
Before
water
the
started
bullet.
to pop. Yeah. But I mean, when you think about it, right? Like when you think about pumping a well, when you
Right.
pump a well, oftentimes what will come up first is the gas that comes
Mhm.
out of that well before the water starts to flow. And who knows what kind of noxious fumes might come out of that gas, right? But it's an indicator that there's something in there, but that first thing that came out was not what I'm going for. So when people and humans are emotionally dysregulated, it doesn't excuse what they said. But if the leader can recognize that what they said just came from a place of emotional dysregulation and you can not take that personally, oh, it's a game changer. It's a game
Right.
changer.
Yeah. And then often, from what I have found from being as a sales executive, often, that first thing out of whether it's a client's mouth or
Mhm.
somebody that I work with, often that first thing, yeah, we don't want to pretend it never happened. But even the second thing is not always quite where you want to be to find out. And it's often, I found for me, if it's a sales thing, if we solve this, are we moving forward? Well, okay, if we solve that, and then finally you get down to their base thing, which is like the third time in, where you kind of find now you start feeling what they're going through. And I think that goes the same way, whether it's a middle schooler,
Mhm.
because we all are. And
Mhm.
we'll just phrase it that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
and so often it's interesting because I had one of my managers not too long ago pull me aside and said, you're not motivated by this.
Mm.
I recognize that when we do something like this, you don't really care. I'm
Wow.
like, yeah, you're right. I don't care about that. He goes, I need to know what you care about. Tell me, right? Where are we at? And so, and at first I had to sit there and go, based off of what our conversation was, I kind of went, well, let me think for a second. Cause, we were in a place where we could talk. right? But it was one of those brief moments where it dawned on him that I did not care about the sales accolades, right? That, oh, Mark gets this award. I don't really care, right? That means nothing to me. Really for me, and this is part of what drove the podcast, was, you talk about I'm sure you've heard of strength finders.
Yeah, love them.
Right.
Love them.
Yeah, love it.
Love them.
And so my top strength is developer. And if you go back and look at strength finders and what is developer, developer is an individual who wants to help people from where they are to help them get to where they can be better. Whatever their goal is, whatever their focus is, they want to improve. And so for him to have asked that of me, I had to sit back and go, well, really, my number one strength is developer. So from my end, if I can help my people improve, now we're talking. Now that changes the game. Now there's some motivation for me to see some success with the people that I work with, right? And so anyway,
can I ask you, Mark? Can I ask you? We're going to go a little tangential, but what are your top 5?
My top 5. Oh my gosh. I don't know if I'd have to go look it up now. It's been so long. But
what are the ones you remember? What are the ones you remember?
Developer,
yep,
belief, and restorative.
Ooh, that's heavy.
3 of my top 5.
So good. Yeah. That's so good. Okay, that's funny. I was recently at a speaker's boot camp. Okay. And at a speaker's boot camp, part of your kind of identity as a speaker is to know your top 5. And so I got my top 5 right here. Right here.
I'm actually, I have it. I'm actually pulling it up on I keep a copy of it. I downloaded everything. So
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, while you're looking it up, here are my top 5. And I wonder if I'm interested. They shouldn't surprise you, but here they are: ideation, connectiveness, strategic, positivity, and there it is, number 5, empathy. So what's interesting, when I saw this, it was an affirmation, because if empathy had been number 1, it would have meant that way into the touchy-feely, really into the like super feeling, which I'm not against. I'm not against. What I'm really interested in my life as a purpose is, what are the different ways that we can connect strategically and maintain a positive sense to bring empathy as a skill into the world.
Okay, you ready? Found mine.
Hit it. What you got?
All right. Developer, restorative, adaptability, belief, and arranger.
Which explains why you're the host and I'm the guest. That's great. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. No, I thanks for taking that little tangent. I appreciate it.
No worries. No worries. Earlier you mentioned, we've talked about you being in the education field, right? Mm-hmm. And, working with middle schoolers and things like that. What was, and now you're working with adult middle schoolers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, reality, what was the pivotal time? What made you go from that full time in the education of our youth, which to me is one of the most commendable things on the planet to do, to now transitioning over to using those same skill sets with leaders and the middle schooler adults?
Well, Mark, without saying back when I was a kid, but it has to do with it. So the short story is, as a child, I was raised to have a very, very strong empathic nature. And it became I would say, it was something that I took on, where when you talk about being an empath, that is what I felt from the very beginning, almost to the point where I didn't have an identity for myself. I have worked a lot with therapists, coaches, people in the space of self-development and growth to clarify who is Joseph Cope without other people in his life. But before that work happened, my calling was to find an identity in helping others through their pain. And what better population to work with than children who experience all those things, are growing up, and you fall into the category of being a superhero just by being someone that they look up to. And but you know what that made me though, Mark? It made me an award-winning educator, somebody who just poured in all of my efforts into the
Right.
children that I worked. And it was so rewarding for the time that it was the season of my life to be there. When I actually had a gentleman come to one of the schools that I worked at, gave the best professional development training I ever had. It was like he brought science to the art of what I did intuitively in my conversations with my kids. And when I moved into leadership in education, so I was in leadership in education once I got out of the classroom, I realized that adults are really like big middle school kids. And some of the things that I used with my middle school kids, I was now having conversations like that with the adults. And so eventually, Mark, I got a chance to become to long story short is I now one of my hats is I get to be a national trainer for that same gentleman. We're going around the country working with teachers and educators, teaching kids and adults, or teaching adults how to have conversation with kids that get them to carry the weight of their own behavior. Well, after working in that space for about 6 or 8 months, people started asking, well, do you only work with teachers? And so that's when the empathy guy was born, because when we start realizing that adults in all spectrums of life are dealing with the same things, which is really childish behaviors, either yours or mine, and what can we do to create that space for them, that is where the journey really began of the empathy guy. And now the lens of being an educator fits into that, because when I do workshops in corporations and organizations, you're looking at somebody who, when you sit in one of my workshops, you're going to be like, huh, this guy kind of knows how to put a lesson plan together because he's done, oh, yeah, he's an educator. That's of
Just a
course he
couple.
does.
Just a
Yeah,
couple
just
over
a
the years.
few,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And then when you see me on stage, people are going to go like, well, how is it that yours was so engaging, whatever it was? And I have to remind people, I was on stage for 15 years in front of 10 to 15-year-olds all day, every day. So there's a piece of it that has to stay engaged. So some of the things that I'll do, you'll feel like you're in your middle school class when I'm on stage, but it's also just about connecting and knowing what it takes to engage with an audience.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That is fascinating. I mean, it sounds like it's a long, it was a somewhat of a long process, but it makes sense, right? To go from where you were to where you are now. And so, um, some of the things that we've actually spoke a lot about in the podcast is obviously our focus is on building connections,
Beautiful.
healthy connections, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. What would be the two or three things, a couple of things maybe, that when you're talking to a leader, let's say this is the first time you've met with them,
Mm-hmm.
and here's the couple pieces of advice you would give them to help them to better connect with their team.
Yeah. So when I'm coaching things up, and I'm so glad you asked, when I'm speaking on stage, one of the frameworks that I always will come back to is what I call the cargo framework. And the cargo framework, in simplicity, it's not about your baggage. It's about bringing cargo with intention. And so cargo stands for connection, which is I'm here for you, not against you. What can you do in your conversations to make sure that the recipient knows I'm here for you, not against you? The A stands for accountability. And that's not accountability to what's on the wall. That's not accountability to something greater. It's accountability to your own values. Are you being the mirror in this conversation?
Right.
If Gandhi says, be the change you want to see in the world, that's your opportunity to be accountable in that moment. And then the R stands for resistance. Resistance is simply, what is the resistance that I feel in myself? Not the resistance from them, because that's why this conversation is happening, because there's resistance. But in that moment, can I be reflective enough to identify the resistance within myself to still be accountable to
Right.
connect with them? You see, once those pieces are in place with me, the leader, then we're going to do my best to speak to the gain. The G stands for gain. What is the gain that the other person is receiving? Let me put it this way. What is the currency that they are spending in that I can invest in?
Right.
If we want people to invest in themselves, we have to be able to spend in a currency that has value to them. But I can't do that without connecting, without holding myself accountable and without identifying the resistance in myself. Because then the gain is all about me, or the gain is all about the outcome. The gain is all about my feelings. The gain is all about what's on the wall, those 5 words that are on the wall. None of that is going to resonate with somebody who is struggling in that moment. So the
Yeah.
G piece is so vital, but you can see the work that we have to do as leaders to get to that gain with them. And then finally, the O in the cargo framework is outlook rather than outcome. When we focus on the outcome, it becomes very binary. Are we doing this? Did we not get it done? Is this achieved? Did we not? And when something is binary, it feels very much like we're setting ourselves up for success or failure, but there's no room for the space in between. When we focus on the outlook, what we've done is just focus on that space in between to fractionally see how can we shift this perspective in this moment. That's the outlook that we're looking towards. So when we talk about what are a few things that we can talk about, right? To me, just starting with connecting as a human. What can we do to just start by connecting with a human? And then, if you're a leader, have you done the value work to identify what is it that I am in this life? And how am I living those out every single day?
Okay. So what would you say? I'm going to follow up with that question
Mhm,
with you say the very first thing is to make a connection.
mhm.
How does someone do that? That may not come naturally to them. Some people, like you say, some people are born with that ability just to connect with everybody around them. And others, it's, head against the wall. you know
Cool.
so what would you say, how would a leader then make that connection to begin that process? What do couple things they can do to help with that with someone they're working with?
Absolutely. So, if you're familiar with Brene Brown's work on vulnerability, vulnerability is our ability to take down those walls to the capacity that we can. And so sometimes a leader in that moment can even just say something like, if this has never happened before, a leader might look at them and just say, "Hey, I'm trying something different. Do you mind just sitting in my office while I try something different? Because I know that this hasn't worked before. So I'm going to do what I can to try something different. Are you open to that?" Just that vulnerability is an opening for potential connection.
Yeah, I can see that.
Taking down the wall of power over and sitting in the space of power to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Leaders tend to have this thought of, because I'm a leader, I have power over you. But when you insert vulnerability into that space, now it's, I'm the leader, but we're going to do what we can to empower you to see that there's value in this conversation. There's value in this connection. And we're not even focused on the outcome. Like, a leader is going to realize in that moment, we're having this conversation. I don't know where this is going to go. It might be open ended, and this might not end the way that I thought it would. Because when I thought about this conversation 30 times last night, right now, I don't know how that's going to go
Yeah,
because I don't
yeah.
know the
I
state that they're
I
in.
visualized how I want it to go. It doesn't always mean it's going to happen that way.
No. But to even just put yourself out there, like, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm trying something. Are you open to trying this with me?
Yeah. So, does the empathy guy have a book? Have you
Mm.
put a book out there yet?
I'm so glad you asked that. I am signing with a publisher. I'm signing with a group that is going to work with me, and there will be a book
Awesome.
by
Okay, good.
the new year. We're looking for the new year is what we're working on. So I'm so glad that you asked.
I
We're
asked
putting it
because
together.
I'm a huge reader, and I often love to I've started to put into and asking guests what are some of the books that they like to read. What would you recommend as
Oh,
as someone like myself, right? I mean,
hmm,
obviously I love to connect, right?
hmm,
But if I'm just a regular leader out there that wants to, what book or two would you recommend that I could go to as a resource today until the
hmm.
empathy guy comes out next year?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Okay, so there's two that I would recommend.
Okay.
The first one is actually, and I wonder if I have it in front of me. I don't. But the first one is Mel Robbins' most recent book called The Let Them Theory.
Oh my heaven help me. That is amazing book.
So the reason that Mel Robbins' book really resonated with me from the perspective of leadership and personal is this. Her Let Them is the beginning of connection with just, I'm going to recognize they have to be able to be them, and I'm not going to force them into anything.
Yes.
Where, as I was reading, the cargo model really resonated was Mel says, let them so I can let me.
Let me.
And can you see the let me? How am I going to connect with this person? How am
Right.
I holding myself accountable to my values? What is the resistance that I feel within myself? Then the G begins to emerge because now you've let them. And again, as you're letting them, you're collecting currency and finding out what it is that they're speaking in. And the let them theory is all about outlook, not the outcome. It's just sitting in the space of shifting constantly the outlook. How can we change the outlook? So that's one, the let them theory. The number two one that I would, and we haven't necessarily talked about this, and we may have a chance, but it might be another one, but is this concept of self-empathy. Self-empathy is creating the space for yourself so you see the value of change for yourself. And the book that I would recommend in that space was the book that got me on this entire journey, which is Jen Sincero's book, You're a Badass. It was written
Okay.
in I think it was published in 2000, maybe 2000. It was published before COVID, which says something. So she does a great job of like poking fun at the personal development, but it's a great, easy read. And it gives you almost, it's like if you've never done the work, it almost gives you permission to think differently about yourself and creating the space for yourself to see yourself differently when you look in the mirror every single morning. Because I will say this until the cows come home, Mark. Your capacity to create space for others is limited only by your capacity to create space for yourself. And if you can't create space for yourself, the space that you create for others will feel inauthentic. It will feel inauthentic. So when we talk to leaders in this space, oftentimes they will ask that same thing, like, Joseph, how do I connect? Like, what do I do? What's the first thing that I have to do?
Can you get, as a leader in the typical business world, can you give me 5 steps and I can
Yeah,
follow all those? I mean, because we're used to that on the wall accountability. Okay, step
yeah,
one. Okay,
yeah.
I've made eye contact with Joseph. Check. My body language is correct. Check. All
Check.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. I've identified the resistance within myself. I feel like I'm 14 years old. Check. But
Check.
but then what? But then what do I
Exactly.
do?
Because we've been trained as leaders, we have been trained to think that way. From a
Yes.
business standpoint, we're trained to that wall accountability. Here's
Yeah.
the list. How many
Uh-huh.
calls did you make today? Right. I mean, I'm in sales. So the typical thing that I've had with salespeople all the time is okay, it's a numbers game. Make 30 calls a day,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Check. Right. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
those are easy things to do, but the human side
Mm.
is not a checkbox. It's not a
Mm.
checklist.
Mm. Okay, you asked for two books. I'm going to give you one more because we're hitting
Oh, a
here, and
bonus
this
book.
hits a
Okay.
bonus book. The book is called The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. Martha
Okay.
Beck was Oprah's life coach, so you know
Okay.
she's got weight. It was Martha Beck that changed the way that I saw the word integrity. Think about this. Integrity has the same root word as integer, and an integer is a whole number.
Right.
Integrity is living a whole life. Brene Brown would call it living a life of wholeheartedness. And when we are focused just on checking off the boxes, it means we're focused on an outcome. And if the outcome is driving our decisions and our choices, we don't have a chance to step back and say, what am I feeling about this? What's the work that I need to do? What is it that makes me not feel whole in this moment? So when leaders will ask, what can I do to connect? The work is not a simple checklist. It's Where is the living of wholeness that we're coming from in this conversation? Where is the living of wholeness that we are coming to in everyday work that we come to when we step through the threshold? Are you so focused on the outcomes that you've forgotten all of the things underneath? Or are you willing to ask yourself, where am I today? How am I entering this conversation? Am I coming to this conversation from a place of being whole with the work that I have done on myself? And if I haven't done that work, am I open to asking what is the work that I could do to create space for myself, to create space for the others that I'm working with and around and in this space?
That's the vulnerability, not only with yourself, right?
Ooh,
Which is huge.
ooh,
But I've also found there's been times when you have that relationship with the employee that they can be, you have that connected enough
mhm,
to have the strength to ask the person,
mhm,
what are you seeing that I'm good at, as
ooh,
well? What are
ooh,
you seeing that I could really help things improve with us and with our team?
mm,
When you go at it with that vulnerability, I think that if you, but you have to have, you've had to have done that work ahead of time.
yes.
You got to be down the cargo path a
Ye-
ways before you
Yes.
can do that. But once you've reached that point, that changes the whole dynamic of the relationship between yourself
Mm,
and that other person. And I'm going to say it. The last episode we had where Joel Stedman was interviewing me, Joel was my boss years and years ago. And that's
mm,
the kind of thing he was.
mm,
And that is part of the reason why when he and I connected 20 years ago, the first time, and we're still good friends. And he's the one that said, Mark, you need to be interviewed. I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. You
mm.
know, but that's the kind of thing that a real good leader can do, is to say, not only what am I good at, what do you see that brings value, but what's an area that I can do to improve what we're doing together with the same goal in.
Mark, empathy is reciprocal.
Mhm.
So when we think about the definition of empathy, empathy is the skill a leader possesses to create space for another human so that individual can see the value of change for themselves. When somebody creates that space, with it comes vulnerability, and with that vulnerability comes trust.
Right.
And when trust comes through vulnerability because of the skill of empathy, now there's reciprocity in that relationship. And can you just imagine in an organization where there was a leader who had that level of trust with the next level of leaders,
Mhm.
and those leaders were being trained with intention to create that space for those who were under them? And can you see how the culture of an organization could change with the skill of empathy coming down from?
It makes me think of General Powell, General Colin
Oh,
Powell, right? And
yes.
there's a quote, and I'm gonna paraphrase, and I'm gonna probably slaughter it. Um, but he basically said, true leadership in the sense is that, I'm paraphrasing, I'm messing this up already. I know what it's in my head, but basically, you'll follow the leader off the cliff just out of curiosity to see where he's going.
Ooh,
Right.
ooh.
It's like, as when you build that kind of team and that leadership and that synergy and empathy that goes
Mhm,
back and forth between the two,
mhm,
you will
mhm.
go off the cliff with them just out of curiosity.
Mm.
You'll do whatever it takes to follow this person.
Malcolm Gladwell talks about what leadership is. Like that, his books are about, what great leaders are.
Right.
And one of the variables that he says, you know that there's a great leader. I can't remember what book he says it in, but he says you know somebody is a great leader when people choose to follow them.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what you're saying, right? Like people are curious about what is it that he or she is going to do next. And we've had so many great conversations where I have his ear, he has my ear. She is somebody who I trust, but she's three rungs down the ladder in terms of leadership. But my goodness, the input that she's giving to me, I'm willing to value it, right? But that reciprocity in trust and vulnerability, because people have that capacity to create that space with intention, it creates this upward this upward spiral of things that are taking place where now the leader is not in a position of I'm the head person. It's they really have that reciprocity within all of those people who are underneath them because of the space that has been created.
Just in our conversation today, I have to tell you, I have so many books. Oh, that there's that principle in that book, and oh, and that principle's in this book, and that principle's in that book, and it's just like, oh my gosh, right? It's and so I think there's so much that we can do as leaders to be able to help create that, right?
Agreed.
And I think the very first step often comes with that willingness to be even just a little bit vulnerable. I love the idea that you mentioned of having I'm going to try something new. Have someone come into your office. I'm going to try something new today.
Mhm.
Even if you've had a good relationship with that individual,
Yeah.
that even opens up in my mind an even greater opportunity, because the person who's resistant to you, they might go, all right, you can try something new. I'm not certain it's going to work, right?
Yeah.
but if you've had a little bit of good interaction with that individual, and you have even just the minute amount of connection, then you
Yeah.
can then turn around and say, I want to try something new. I want
Mhm.
your feedback. Tell me
Mhm.
what's working for you and what isn't in this process.
When you're talking to me here, and I'm imagining like a 14-year-old boy in the principal's office who's like, yeah, you can try all the new things you want, but not going to work.
Exactly.
They're not going to work. But one of the misconceptions about empathy is that empathy is always nice. You see, I just recently read from somebody I look up to a lot on LinkedIn. His name's Shola Richards. He talked about the difference between niceness and kindness. And I think that, and just in general, niceness is just kind of what goes out there. Niceness feels like sympathy. Kindness is intention. The courage that it takes to be kind in these hard moments, and walking into some of those moments, just reminding yourself, this is a human on the other side. What can I do to do my best to maintain a level of kindness? But it doesn't necessarily mean soft. It doesn't mean nice. It
No,
doesn't
no.
mean that there is still a level of accountability as humans that we have to hold people to. And as a leader, that's why I'm a leader, because I'm going to do my best to hold you accountable. I'm just not going to do it with a hammer over your head, and I'm not going to berate you into it. I'm also not going to manipulate you into it. I'm going to take it from a human perspective. And sometimes it's okay for the person to respond negatively, but the way that you know you've created a space of empathy, genuine empathy, is there's boundaries that are in place. You as a leader don't leave the conversation dysregulated. You don't feel like you have to solve the problem. And you know that this conversation is not the end all be all. It may be the opening to another conversation down the road. And that's all it is, right? To be able
Yeah.
to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think of a leader that I've worked with over the years, and she phrased it, because she and I would have a conversation periodically. You're having a people issue or whatever it was, a struggle,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're
Mm-hmm.
having a people issue, her phrase always was, "Make sure you're clear but kind."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so you can be clear, and here's the boundaries, as you mentioned, and
Mm-hmm.
here's this and
Mm-hmm.
here's this,
Mm-hmm.
but you do it in a kind way.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen her more than once in
Mm-hmm.
interactions with people being very clear and kind. And she was actually one of my leaders. And I remember the first time she said that, I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Right. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like we're so used to hearing the platitudes that we hear out in the business world. Right? I mean, that's just it. And so when she said that, I remember I was the 14-year-old in the principal's office, whatever. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and if she watches this, she'll know who she is, right? She's like, so you thought that the first time you heard that, right? And so, um, anyway, uh, but I saw her utilize that more than once.
Mm-hmm.
And most everybody that has had an opportunity to work alongside her, even though she and I clashed a few
Mm-hmm.
times,
Mm-hmm.
um, I still highly respect her,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because she had that ability to be clear and kind at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And I think that's something that can take a leader, if they've not done it before, a little bit of practice.
So here's a little tip from a former educator. In those times where you need to have something done, Like the deadline is looming. The outcome is clear that we have to get to, because time is a real thing, right?
Right.
We have to, and numbers and quotas, those are all real things. But here's a little phrase that is so human and connecting. It's, this is what we have to get done. What does that look like to you?
Mm-hmm.
And you may even phrase it, I don't know what it looks like to you. And I don't even want this conversation to be about that outcome. I'm just wondering what it looks like to you. Are you open to putting a pause in this conversation now so that I can reframe for myself and you have an opportunity in our follow up conversation to let me know? Because I hired you for a reason. I know the potential that I see in you, but I feel like I'm missing something. What does this look like to you? Because human beings thrive when they have a sense of autonomy. And you just activated that sense of autonomy by asking, what does it look like to you? And they might say, I don't know. But that's where you, as a leader, give them a chance to sit into that growth mindset and say, you don't know yet, but let's take the time to figure out what it looks like to you. And if you're having a hard time and need a thought partner with it, I'm here, but I can't wait for our next conversation.
And I love the can't wait for our next conversation. Right. I mean, because that doesn't close the door. I think that's very, very powerful from a leader standpoint. Right.
Mm,
And so, well, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. It was kind of like our phone calls that we've had together. You get down and like, oh, I don't want this to end, but we need to start wrapping things up. I'd love to have you back again and to have some more conversation. This
yeah.
to me is just amazing. So to wrap things up a little bit, if you were going to give advice to someone, one key takeaway that you would like to share with our audience today when it comes to this topic of empathy, what would you share with us?
The one piece that I would say to folks is that, one, awareness is key. When you start recognizing that something feels off, just validate that it feels off. And then two, ask yourself, what is it that I can do to connect with this human? And if I can't, what do I need to do to reconnect with myself? It's not a small thing, Mark, that connection is the beginning of the cargo model.
Right.
And our capacity to create space for others is limited by our capacity to create space for ourselves. So if disconnection is occurring for whatever reason, hard truth, it's usually not them. It's something in me. So what do I need to do? Whether that means take a step back, whether that means take a small breath, whether that means just focusing on nasal breathing just in that moment, whether it means saying serenity now, like they do on Seinfeld,
That's one of my
whatever it
favorite.
is,
Yeah.
whatever it is, find a way to reconnect.
Awesome. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for taking some time. And those of you that don't know this, it's a Saturday, and Joseph is taking time out in the middle of his day on Saturday. Um, So thank you. I so appreciate you being willing to do this and spend some time with us today. And for those of you that are just tuning in for the first time, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe. You know the whole game with YouTube. I would sure appreciate that. And I look forward to our coming conversations. And if there's anything that you see and hear that resonates with you and kind of go, oh my gosh, this is great, please let us know. And we will catch you folks on the next go around. Thanks.